Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tiller-Hewitt, and I'm privileged to serve as your moderator today. This year's Transformational Leadership webinar series covers a host of very timely and relevant topics with the best and brightest healthcare leaders. Check out this year's lineup. I'll just start with next month. Very quickly, we are going to have Stop Admiring Your Problems and Start Growing. This is what we've gotten the most laughs from and the most feedback from our tribe, if you will, on what a funny title that is. But the fact of the matter is, admiring our problems has become almost its own pandemic, and it's so easy to fall in line with the masses playing the us too or woe is me game. And this game of admiring our problems creates a spiral of distracting great leaders and organizations from focusing on strategic growth solutions. You'll notice that anytime we use the word growth, we always start it with strategic, because we believe not all business is good business. So when we talk about growth, we're going to talk about being very strategic. Next up is disrupting yourself, the strategic growth imperative. We have some no-nonsense leaders on that panel that are going to try to convince you to stop doing things just because you've always done it that way, and plead with you that leaders are going to have to learn how to innovate from within. Then we're going to go to the consumer activation strategy piece with a couple of our strategic partners, ShareMD and SG2, on driving rapid impact strategic growth by identifying, engaging, and activating qualified consumers, the right consumers into your health system for a lifetime. And then we'll get to see how they provide some shocking data, maybe even about your organization, but around patient access to the organization's key service lines and how they stack up, potentially how you stack up to your competition. Then we're going to talk about the power of data to drive your strategic growth plan. And when I say that out loud, I instantly think, okay, Captain Obvious, who doesn't know the power of data? But I can say unequivocally that many organizations don't have the data and certainly don't use the data when they do have it like they could. We've had organizations that are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for data and are just not putting it to work for them. So, recently we uncovered $100 million opportunity within an organization using their acquired or purchased claims data. And then we're going to round out the year with building your strategic growth dream team. And if for any of the liaisons on the call today, we're going to talk about combining population health efforts with business development and how that really makes a dream team and drives in a tremendous amount of growth, while also helping with all the clinically integrated network measures that we're looking at. And then we're going to end the year sharing what we don't even know yet today, which are the 2023 growth strategies that worked. But for today, we've all become keenly aware that strategic decisions put on pause over the past couple of years are back on the table this year. And today's leaders are challenged to make urgent yet strategic decisions about what to do and equally what not to do. And so with today's unprecedented margin pressures and escalating competition, leaders are now challenged to rapidly recover strategic business. And by rapid, I mean now, to both position the organization for today and for future endeavors long into the future. So today, a fundamentally new approach to near-term growth is required to combat financial pressures, emerging competitive disruptors, and our ever-shifting expectations of our consumers and physicians. So today, we're going to talk about the power of now and how organizations are delivering, and especially these two organizations are delivering on rapid impact growth. So before we start, for those of you who are with us live today, I want to let you know that we are in webinar mode, so we can't hear you, but we want to hear from you. So via the chat, we would love for you to post any questions that you have, or any aha moments, or wow, I've never thought of that before, or useful takeaways. Think about that communication as applause for your panelist. And just to let you know, there are two ways that you can get copies of today's recording, so you can listen to it over and over again. You can either download it from our website. All of our webinars are posted there. Or next week, anyone who's registered will get an email directly from me. Be sure to pass it on. Wanted to remind everyone about our Leadership Lens podcast for growth-minded leaders, where I've interviewed awesome leaders who tell it like it is without sugarcoating and definitely without hiding behind excuses, which is great because Tiller-Hewitt actually has a no excuse policy. These interviews with today's leaders have been off the chart, authentic and thoughtful. And if you want to hear, if you like what you hear today, then check out the podcast, because you're going to hear one-on-one interviews with all of them. And then for all the liaisons, again, or leaders with liaison programs, just wanted to remind you that we have a very robust 2023 virtual workshop schedule. We have 3-day workshop for liaisons and 2-day workshops available for leaders of liaison programs. So again, feel free to hit that QR code and you will be taken right to that page on our website. And last, just want to let you know, for the past 2 decades, Tiller-Hewitt has worked with hundreds of leaders, including the 2 you'll meet today, from hospitals, health systems, and healthcare and physician organizations across the country to consistently deliver strategic growth and measurable results. Times have changed. We used to get calls from CEOs that needed business and were mostly prepared to receive it. But today is drastically different. Everyone wants it, but almost no one is ready to accommodate it, at least not in the volumes that we deliver. So today, before we launch any strategic growth programs, we start with a data-driven operational readiness assessment. And I know that's a mouthful, so just think about a readiness assessment to see if they're ready for the business. And this helps us uncover leakage and find out why it's leaking, uncover barriers to access to key departments. We get stakeholder buy-in from the beginning, and we identify process improvement events that need to happen before we stand up and send out superstar liaisons to drive in business that, as Tommy says, will quickly turn bottlenecks into choke points. So the top portion of this slide just talks about the readiness assessment and where we create our strategic growth plan or playbook. And then the bottom is really the execution, how we execute the plan through either a physician integration program, if part of the play is we need to ramp up our new providers faster, or we've got a retention issue. But our gold standard program is our liaison program. But I will tell you, through execution, research shows that 70 to 90% of strategic failures are due to poor execution. So we've created a system to get that part right. And our track record is rapid impact growth in the millions in the first year. So why are we committed to leadership development with webinars, podcasts, and training? Because we believe that everyone wins when the leader gets better. Because when the leader gets better, everyone gets better. And we also know that often we have limited bandwidth, budgets, or resources to deliver innovation, to compete. That's why we need to remember that sometimes we're the innovator and sometimes we're the imitator. And that's okay. If something's proven and it works, do it. Don't reinvent the wheel. Darcy's going to share a case study from his organization that will give you all kinds of tips and techniques that you can apply to start working on rapid impact growth. So today is going to be no exception. We're going to learn from 3 leaders who live it, breathe it, and have the t-shirts and they're going to share with you today. So I'm going to take down the slide deck and I'm going to open it up for our panelists to introduce themselves. And let's start with ladies first. Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. My name is Brittany Lawson. I am currently the Vice President of Operations for health system in Richmond, Virginia, Henrico Doctors Hospital, which is part of HCA. I've been in this role for 2 years now. Previously, I've worked in various markets across the United States in roles as physician liaison, director of business development, also on the physician side, director of operations. even in clinical research. So quite a breadth of experience across our healthcare spectrum, and really enjoying this time now to operationalize and quickly grow, as we're going to talk about today, some key services and really looking at that impact across our community.
Awesome. Darcy?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Darcy Craven. I'm president and CEO of Archibald Medical Center, which is a 4-hospital system in Southwest Georgia. Prior to that, I've been here for about 2.5 years, moved during the pandemic, which is kind of crazy. Prior to this, I was up in Buffalo, New York, Western New York with Kaleida Health as a hospital president.
Awesome. Tommy?
Hey, I'm Tommy Tiller. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Tiller-Hewitt. I have also had the pleasure of working directly with Brittany and Darcy as clients, so I'm looking forward to talking more about that today.
Awesome. Well, I've just been told that the chat we're having some access issues to the chat room or chat box, so we're having someone take a look at that outside of this group because I have a hard time multitasking. All right, so I would like to start with the top challenges and how you're dealing with them related to rapid impact growth. And remember, rapid impact growth just means growth now, today, not long-term planning, but very short-term, near-term. So Tommy, I'm going to start with you. As you work with organizations and leaders across the country, what are you seeing and solving for as it relates to the top challenges related to rapid impact growth?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, the last couple of years have been very challenging for health systems. I would say 2022 was especially challenging because financially, the government funds dried up and payer contracts didn't keep up with the absurd labor and supply cost increases. So we were left with labor and supply costs that dramatically shrink margins while our staffing shortages continued to diminish capacity and burn out those folks that are around still, which forced many organizations to turn away the patients that they so desperately needed to remain financially viable. I would say the resounding message this year is that the word is sort of out. No one's coming to save us again. Then we need to figure out a way to solve our problems to survive and thrive. I would say most organizations that we speak with and work with realize that growth is the only way out of this long term, but most are simultaneously struggling right now to accommodate the volume they already have, which really complicates the development of a growth strategy. And even more importantly, I would say it makes it difficult to obtain any internal buy-in to a growth strategy and then execute it in the market. Imagine trying to get your outpatient radiology team on board with a growth strategy when they have 5,000 orders in the queue, or getting aggressive with a GI growth strategy when we've got 5,000 scopes in the queue. I would say I hear a story like this nearly every day from clients and colleagues about one service line or another, and it's just maddening to them and us, working with them. The volume that they need is there, and everyone's struggling to get out of their own way to accommodate it. What this means for most organizations, I'd say if you're one of the lucky few that are in the camp that truly have access and capacity, the market is really yours for the taking right now. Aggressive growth strategies will almost certainly capture market share from weaker competitors. One word of caution for those that think that you're in this camp, be sure, because it's becoming more and more common for us to engage leadership teams and even start engagements on the premise that capacity is there. And as Tammy mentioned, today is a bit of a different story than in the past. So we often find out during that assessment that there are bottlenecks and long waits that haven't necessarily been communicated upstream in sufficient detail. That is, leaders are off sometimes being told what they want to hear and less of what's really going on in the trenches. So, attempting to execute a growth strategy without capacity does more harm than good. Diminish goodwill when you go out and claim to be able to accommodate patients and referrals that you can't. And it often costs you market share long-term. For the rest of us that are struggling with access and capacity, we've just got to be even more creative and strategic than ever before to ensure that we're using our finite amount of capacity to best serve the organization's strategic priorities in the short term, while we work toward longer term capacity enhancement strategies like recruitment play, adding access points, et cetera, things that we know we need to do that can't necessarily be solved for in 23. A good bit of our work over the last year or even two have been with clients that are struggling with this, and that is how do we thread the needle of capacity and growth to retain the largest possible percentage of patients and optimize our overall financial performance, which, if you think about it, is a summation of all of today's learning objectives. How do we thread the needle of capacity and growth to retain our patients and optimize our financial performance, which I would say is my definition of strategic, making sure that we go after and keep the volume that we need to be successful while we work longer term to accommodate and retain the rest of the volume. A few quick thoughts before I turn it over to Brittany and Darcy. While access and capacity are often used interchangeably, and admittedly, even by me sometimes, when true capacity gets tight, we really have to focus more on access so that we can maximize the capacity. Oftentimes, I see front-end access issues like patient access delays, challenges in clinics, ancillary services. Those things often create an illusion that we lack capacity. So this is where the assessment and process improvement work becomes critical to success to ensure that we are properly funneling referrals and patients to areas that have capacity. Also be mindful not to think of a one-size-fits-all model as it relates to access and capacity. So, we've been implementing quite a few side doors to key service lines, different ways to access service lines that have capacity where they can avoid the areas where we potentially have bottlenecks currently. Also, telehealth, prioritization of volume and shifting volume to different locations, areas that potentially have capacity. Darcy, I think, will speak to this, where we've had the ability to push some capacity and imaging and some other service lines to other facilities that have some capacity. And I would say that as well as some other ideas that may have not been viable a couple of years ago could work now and will work now. So disruption is going to be a key to continuing to solve for today's challenges. And those that can get out of the "we've always done it that way" mindset will emerge winners. Also, those organizations that communicate well with their physicians and listen to their needs are still holding on to loyalty within their physician base, despite access and capacity challenges that we're working through. Organizations with strong operators and strong sales teams that work together are almost always are able to act on physician needs and prioritize them well. And that is a key measure and metric of success. I would say, sometimes selfishly, but I believe this to my core, that every organization needs a structured, well-timed and well-trained and well-positioned sales team. Darcy and Brittany will certainly speak to this today, but I truly believe that it's the tip of the spear and it's critical to executing a growth strategy. And, the last thing I'll say is that the fundamentals are still the most important. Patients first, deliver the highest quality product you're capable of delivering with the easiest access you can put together, and communicate as transparently as you can to key stakeholders to gain and retain, and sometimes, unfortunately, regain trust.
Wow, that was a lot to digest.
I think we're done. Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah, thank you
That
for
was great.
coming. Mic drop. Yeah, that's good. Well, Tommy, there are a couple things that I love the part about access issues give you the illusion that you have capacity issues. And I love that. And that may set some people free on this call. I love your side doors that you talked about. Like, we've got to get creative about, if you have 7,000 in the queue, is patient access your problem? So do we need a side door to, so there's all kinds of, so I love that. And we'll talk about some of those details later. So thank you. I was trying to take notes so I could ask you questions about a million of those things, but we'll get around to it. So Darcy, I'm going to pitch to you now. So
right.
I know on your watch, you've been there for a short time, and my God, have you created some huge home runs. So I know you have tremendous success records around rapid impact growth and have a case study to show for it. But before we talk about the results, what would you say are today's biggest challenges and maybe how you're solving for those?
Well, I think I go back to a lot of what Tommy said. I think every hospital in the country would tell you they have capacity problems, right? And most of that's on the inpatient side. No one has enough staff on the inpatient side or the emergency room, and that creates real capacity problems. I think our biggest challenge here, and it's a lot of our work with Tiller-Hewitt's been on, is, we'll call it access, but it's really about, for me, it's the culture. It's the way that my team does business. And when I got here, they're operating in these silos and not talking to each other. And that's where I think what Tommy says about access mirrors a capacity problem when it's not. It's about, getting people to all be on the same page and really know that, when we're out there selling, whether it's imaging or whatever services, and we get those referrals, we got to do a great job of getting them registered, pre-registered, pre-authorized, get their tests done, and get it done in a really timely fashion with a smile on our face in order to capitalize on that. And we've seen some tremendous growth, especially on the outpatient side. I think everyone is focused on outpatient revenue growth, and that's where we've seen tremendous growth over the past 2 years. Even coming out of the pandemic, I was looking at some data last week to prepare for this, and our growth over the past fiscal year, which is basically October of 19 to September of 20, which included pandemic months, we're seeing growth over the full year pre-pandemic. So, we're seeing some tremendous numbers, and there's no way we would have been able to capitalize on that had we not solved some problems on the front end, some intake problems, and getting people through the system. So, I think access is something you can really tackle. It takes some hard work. It takes smart people, but getting people to move people through the system and get it done really efficiently. And I think everyone, when you talk about growth in the future, capital is a real problem for people now. You can't afford to have a miss on your capital dollars. Everyone's got a negative margin. So if you're going to buy a CT scanner because you think it's going to produce growth, it better produce growth when you spend $1.5 million to get that done. So that goes back to your point with data. You better understand the data and be pretty sure that things are going to pay off in the future, or else you're wasting your money.
And I would add to that, also have boots on the ground, people promoting it to the practices
100%.
every day, all day. So
100%. We have, I have a longstanding relationship with Tiller-Hewitt at 2 different hospitals now, and we have 2 fantastic physician liaisons here, and do just an incredible job for us selling our services, really focused on, especially on outpatient imaging, but all outpatient services. We see some tremendous growth. And the thing that surprises me the most all the time, still after working with you for, 10 years, is how unloyal doctors are to the hospitals that pay them. We can pull business out of secondary markets just by our team going in there and selling. And it's unbelievable, but it works all the time.
I totally hear you on that. I have to echo that sentiment. What they care about is how quickly they can get in and do their job. Like, that's what they care about. And it is absolutely, when you have a good team that's out there kind of not only talking about like what you have available and kind of promoting your doctor, promoting your services, but also those that can really help you tackle like those, kind of block and tackle on the issues very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the biggest difference. And I think especially now, when you show that you're taking that seriously and you're able to, follow up with a phone call the next day or whatever that looks like to say, hey, we removed that barrier, that's going to build some additional trust and really help. Especially if I'm thinking outpatient imaging or any of those things, it really kind of accelerates the growth that much faster because you're building that traction quickly.
Yeah, and I think, just calling it what we call it, Darcy, is being the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we win business that we shouldn't win because maybe we're not better than the competition on something because we're easier. Mm-hmm. And we have to figure out how we can be easier. And, that buys loyalty, sadly, more than a paycheck. Often. And
that's where if you solve the access issues, you immediately become easier because, your competitors are not easier. Capacity, we have, I'm sure 90% of the people on this call, gastroenterology is a capacity problem for everybody. It's just you don't have enough doctors to get the business done, and you got to recruit, and it's a long-term strategy. But getting MRIs or CTs, everyone has these machines, and it's about making sure you use them efficiently as possible. Tommy mentioned it. We're moving business from our main market to our secondary market because it might be a week wait for an MRI here, but we can get you tomorrow at our secondary market, and people are willing to drive 20 minutes if they can get their MRI tomorrow. It's just about making sure the team is all connected and doing the right thing for the patients.
Ding, ding, ding. And before I go over to Brittany, I'm sorry, Tommy, go ahead.
I was going to, give some credit to the liaison team at Archbold. They're absolutely top notch. And I think that's a secret to success is that, most of, and I'll say our liaisons, but a strong sales team are typically built with people that are probably going someplace else. Ultimately, Brittany was a liaison. She'll be a hospital CEO in a couple of years. So, a lot of our liaisons are future leaders, and you get that feel from them when they're out in the field because they're well educated, they're well versed on the product and the organization. So it's almost as though they get to deal with a CEO that comes to their office every few weeks to talk to them and solve problems because they really are the voice of the CEO. So as they're working to resolve those issues, there are referring docs also feel like they're part of the solution. Sometimes it still takes us forever to solve the problem, but Brock and Catherine are in the office every few weeks to give them a status update and a check. And they're also staying in front of our teams internally because you got to be persistent internally and externally. So we'll get something rolling, it'll be rolling perfect. And you go back out a few months later and things have slipped. So we've got to go back and sort of start things over and keep things moving. It's a contact sport always with every service line. And, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 referrals from each office that we're out getting and working so hard for, that all adds up to tens of millions of dollars in the course of the year.
And I think the direct relationship with the CEO that you mentioned, that's the key to this whole program, that people know that, our two, Brock and Catherine, are my liaisons, and everyone knows that they report to me and they meet with me every Friday to talk about the prior week's business and work. And, everyone understands that when they say something to Brock and Catherine, that it's really they're talking to me. And the most powerful is in your internal market, where especially your employee providers, they start understanding that they can really get their problem solved by talking to these two people. And it's sometimes I'm hearing things I probably never would have heard if I didn't have these liaisons. And you're out to tackle it and get it done, and really grow that relationship with your providers.
Good. Wow. One thing before I switch over to Brittany is we did a process improvement at your organization for imaging and was able to, you're seeing the benefits of that. But you recently told a story that a new person started in imaging and could have potentially undone everything that we did to grow this. Talk about that story and what you did about it.
The imaging has been a huge success here. It's been really a catalyst for outpatient growth. So when Tiller-Hewitt engagement started, we spent a lot of time as we're training the liaisons, but developing a team to really look at our access problems, and really built a structure where, we were able to capture all that business. And so some incredible double-digit growth on whether it's outpatient CTs or outpatient MRIs, just tremendous growth. And just recently, within the last 2 months, the liaison started hearing problems again. So when we started digging into it, one link in the chain changed. Someone and a new person got into patient registration and started tweaking the process just a little bit, but it just created such a domino effect that the access was stopping. We're starting to hear it's 2 weeks again for an MRI. And that's another value of the liaisons. They're able to hear those things in real time from providers and then go back to the team and say, what have we changed here? They pulled everybody together and we found out we did change one little thing. And immediately we're able to reverse course and stop that from being a huge problem. But you always have to stay on this stuff. It's never ending.
That is a crazy, awesome story. Awesome. All right, Miss Brittany, I'm going to switch to you. What would you say are your biggest challenges to rapid impact or near-term growth? And what are you doing to solve for it?
So echoing a lot of the same sentiments as Thomas and Darcy, or Tommy and Darcy, is really, knowing that we're all struggling with staffing, knowing all of these things, it really becomes a question of, at least what I found, is getting back to the basics. So really what I mean by that is understanding, I think a lot of us have used 2019 like, hey, that's, when we were in our prime, that's our benchmark, that's where we had our market share and blah, 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 blah. But the real question is, a lot of things shifted. I'm in a very competitive market with, we've got other HCA hospitals. We also have, competitors, nonprofits, kind of, a litany of competition. And with that being said, we've really had to go back to the drawing board and understand, hey, where is our market share? Like we knew where we were, we knew where our strengths were, but is that in the same place? And even when we review that, we found that we've had to review that more and more frequently to understand where do we need to apply more pressure. I think it's also something to remember, this is a situation where I think before we were casting a really wide net of, hey, it's just getting volume, period. I think we're at a point right now where you're going to have to pick and choose. You really are. And what you thought you might be good at, you may be good at, but you may not have capacity for it. And where just kind of being able to apply pressure in those right points, I think is what we're now looking at. And another thing about back to the basics is really ideas and things that you've maybe talked about, discussed, whatever that looks like, even as recently as 2022, will be very different this year. I will be the first to say, I think a lot of us were living in a, oh my gosh, what's happening next, like a very reactive mode for 2022, because we had high hopes that it was going to be a very different year than I think what it turned out for a lot of us. And 2023 is really going to be about, do we understand what we do well? Do we understand where we have capacity to grow? And like, are we going to be able to go full-fledged, like all into it and really commit to that vision? So I think for us, that's a big thing. I love what Darcy said about outpatient imaging. I think a lot about that. I think about that as such an amazing funnel to start, with your patients, with your physicians. It's, I know that it's a, support service for many of us as a diagnostic test, but those things really show people how well you can do and the efficiencies of your system if you get it right. So I'm a huge proponent for how we manage outpatient imaging, how we think of outpatient labs. Those things for me are in essentially they're access points that I think of, and how do we make those efficient and good experience for people to where they want to come back and they want to, get something done at our ASC or, whatever their choice is or whatever they need to complete their healthcare. I think those are great entry points and things to think outside of like our ED, which we know was our open, our front door that's always open.
Good stuff. So Brittany, as Tommy said, you were a former liaison before you took your next jump up to VP of operations now. I'm curious, what did you bring from all of your experience of boots on the ground, like face to face every day with providers and their staff? What did you bring to your leadership role that has served you well from that experience?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say there's a lot of things. I think it's the first and foremost is understanding how important that physician liaison is, not only in uncovering issues, but being your advocate and also getting in front of things. I think about now, we are very lucky to be getting some new imaging equipment and really kind of upping the ante, I would say, in terms of what we can provide for our cancer patients. But that comes at a cost. It comes at a cost of having to replace something, and that, can impact, of course, our operations. So being able to get in front of that and being able to really control the narrative, I think that's really, really important. That's something I've seen liaisons do super quickly, whether it's their elevator pitch, whether it's just, hey, we've got this new provider or whatever that may be, just being able to work through that. So I definitely understand I understand how to quickly get a message across and the importance of controlling the story as much as you can. So that's definitely one thing. The other thing for me is our liaisons, and thinking about the work that I did in that role, it's important that we understand the physician perspective of it. To Darcy's point earlier, and something that we all also echoed is loyalty is just not there. And it is what it is. It's not something to spend a lot of time trying to fix or, hey, trying to buy someone's loyalty. At the end of the day, it's about an efficient process, and understanding that can better help you understand, okay, where do I need to really spend my time? Is it really in, this small obscure piece that's only going to, maybe impact operations about 5% in terms of efficiency? Or is it, hey, do I need to work on my pre-op process? Do I need to work on my pre-admit process? What's the authorization look like? Kind of taking all of those chunks all the way back to how do we even see the patient in the first place? And what is our doctor kind of dealing with, and what's our patient dealing with? And I think physician liaisons are just so lucky in a sense that they're talking with the physicians. They're also talking with the office managers, who we all know are also great, great, great sources of information. And sometimes they're patients themselves, which is even better in a lot of circumstances. So I just think they bring such a unique perspective. And to everyone's point here, that's your direct line to like your admin team. I wouldn't even just say your CEO for sure. But, in our meetings, it becomes, they are an integral part of our strategy meeting. They are meeting with our COOs, with myself, like they're meeting with everybody and making sure that if it's a problem, that we are literally getting hammered until that problem is fixed. And that's the whole point. It's a very appreciative, hammering annoyance, whatever you want to call it, but it gets the job done. And it ensures that our message, as I said from the beginning, our narrative is holding true and that we're able to control that.
Well, the beauty of what you said is somebody owns it.
Yeah,
and before it would just doctors say it falls into a black hole, or we give them a slow no. And this, you have like a dog after a bone when you have a good outreach team. Tommy, I'm sorry.
It's like, go ahead, Darcy.
I was going to say, what I've noticed, especially on the imaging side here, because that was our biggest problem, was just that whole access and culture, getting things done. Before, where you have liaisons, people have other jobs and they have other things they're doing. So these things, we know this is a problem and I'll get to it, but I got to focus on these things. People get tired of every week hearing the liaison say, well, I heard Dr. So-and-so say you couldn't get an MRI for 3 weeks, and that really becomes a catalyst. And then they tell me, and then I'm asking questions to everybody, why can't we get this fixed? And people really start moving when that just keeps happening every week.
Yeah, versus, not that you would have cared any less, but you're on to the problems people are bringing to you if they don't bring you that same problem over and over again. Brittany, I just had a light bulb go off thinking about in the world of pre-COVID out west, all the work that you all had to do to just keep our own transfers internally from our own facilities to come to the big hospital, that we had to implement I won't say cheesy, but a policy that rhymed, yes and send, so that we start saying yes to transfers and creating virtual beds and basic blocking and tackling strategy. But it was all about getting in front of repeatedly those folks that were transferring, that we only found out they were transferring to the competition because we asked and they said, you guys are too hard. You stopped answering the phone. So we stopped calling. Mm-hmm. And how much work and the teams we put together and how much work you all did out in the field to really solidify that strategy and keep it rolling. And as Darcy said at Archbold, the month that we weren't talking about it and then we weren't on it, we would notice that it would slip back on, back off. So it's got to be a constant focus of attention if we want to get consistent results. And I've honestly never been somewhere where it didn't always require attention. Nothing is really hardwired, because usually to make it the path of least resistance for our referring physicians, it will never be the path of least resistance for us. So unless someone's always watching it, everyone defaults to their path of least resistance, which oftentimes, are at odds.
Mm-hmm.
That's very true. That's a really, really good point. And just to Tammy's point, having someone who owns it, like it, it's nice to be able to say, like, this is my point person. I think people always appreciate that. That's never going to go out of style in terms of being able to send a quick text or a call or whatever that looks like and know that someone's handling it. I think, especially now, if we're talking about culture shifts and things like that, the mere follow-up and transparency of I don't have an answer now, but I'm going to get it to you, I think goes, so far, especially now when, we would be silly to think our consumers know, our patients know that everyone's busy. They know that, they feel that when they walk into an ER and they're waiting for, however long, or, our physicians feel that, or our patients feel that when they're trying to find, a primary care visit in some instances. So, I think that really can help us culturally shift and be, kind of a force if we can stick to that and really utilize our liaisons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tommy, I liked what you said about the path of least resistance isn't for us, it's for the customer. And I think if anyone's standing up process improvement events, that needs to be what you say on day one. After you say, what if we doubled our business tomorrow, and how can we make it easier for the customer, not us? Because oftentimes internally we automate and do all these things that make it easier, but it just is adding steps for our customer. And we just forget, and we just have to be reminded, because oftentimes, we're the only ones out in the field dealing with the customers and hearing it internally. We talk about, process improvement, and it is an improvement internally. So Darcy, I have a question for you. You talked about every Friday that you're meeting with the liaison. So you're hearing what's going on in the field and what barriers exist to growth. Is there ever any friction with the medical group? Because oftentimes when we're going right to the CEO, there could be issues brought up about our own medical group, and we never want to get sideways with operations of the medical group, but we also want them to be just as accountable as the internal department director. So how do you handle those kind of?
Friction is not a bad thing sometimes, right? So that's probably one of the biggest places of friction, I think, is the employed medical group. Because, every Monday morning I have a larger, all my executive team, VP level and up, meet every Monday morning, and the liaisons come to that and basically give the same report out I've already heard on the previous Friday. And my VP of employed practices is sitting at that table. And we do hear, the doctors have learned that going to Catherine and Brock is the quickest path to solve a frustration in their office. And sometimes that rubs the leadership of the medical group the wrong way, but they discover that because they're not getting what they need by going to the regular channels. This, accessing me through liaisons gets things done faster. We have some incredibly busy offices. Our urology office is just, they're seeing 80 patients a day in the clinic and then trying to do surgeries 3 days a week. These guys don't have time to waste for anything. And they'll phone Catherine when there's a office problem, if there's a staffing problem, if they're short, that's where they go, because they've learned that's the path of least resistance. And I'm okay with the frustration if it causes friction amongst my team, as long as we're continuing to move the ball forward and getting better.
And we always call that trusted advisor status within a practice. So, do you work so hard, the liaisons, Brock and Catherine at Archbold, to build this relationship that is so trusted in both ways, that these people know if they go to the liaisons, they're going to get the answer they need, or at least they're going to get honesty and transparency and someone that's going to work on it until it's done.
And you guys know that when we had a turnover in the manager of that office, they wanted the liaison to be their manager. And I had to say no.
and they were more than willing to do it. And I have to say absolutely. And they were more than willing to do it. And I think they would have done a bang up job in the short term, turned around, because they would have looked at it as they always do, through the eyes of the customer.
Yeah.
And, we had a question that's a perfect time to answer it. Sonia asked, how do we ensure the correct operational leaders hear the message and actually act on making changes to accommodate the growth? And I think Darcy just said it. We have to always repeat the same message. We have to assemble the right teams that are led by our leaders. CEO is the best. Darcy leads all these teams. So we ensure that action is taken by ensuring that it's a top-down approach and a message. So we continue to bring the message as the liaison teams to leadership, and they just don't go away until they're fixed.
Yeah, I would say, like, going back to imaging here at Archbold, we created a process improvement team. I was at the table, and we, the liaisons, through their interactions, we developed a problem list. Here's our problem list. And sometimes it hurts people's feelings who've been here for 20 years, and they hear that their department, whether it's registration or whatever, is a barrier. But we got to get past that and just start moving, just continue to get better. And by having everyone at the table and not letting it stop until the problem's actually fixed. We disbanded that team when we had the results we wanted, but just like we just talked about, the liaisons are always ear to the ground. So as soon as we heard there was a problem, we pulled everyone back together and said, what do we change? And we found out what we changed and we corrected it. But, I think you just got to always, if the CEO or chief operating officer, I would say, are not involved, then I think there's too much opportunity for people to not get the job done.
I would definitely agree with that. We have ours as they're part of our admin team meeting. They have a spot for it. So it is our entire admin team that is listening and figuring out what we can do, just given how we've divided our services. And it does make a difference, because I think before they were kind of, we have changes in leadership just like anybody else. And you're trying to figure out who the right contact person is for certain things. And I think it's really helped in the speed with which we can get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about those,
I'm sorry, Tommy.
When we're talking about those service lines that have queues that are backed up so deep, that's where we really need to get creative. And sometimes we have to shift volume or prioritize volume. And, when we're with clients, we help them do that by, leading process improvement teams and initiatives and getting creative to accommodate that volume in different ways, especially the volume that has downstream effects on other specialties and other areas within the organization, of which GI is a big one. So, when your GI queue's backed up, you have issues in surgery and oncology, et cetera.
Definitely.
Yeah, Tommy, that's a great point about the key service. So imaging, if somebody's waiting on image for orthopedics to do surgery, then what's happening there?
They're going
So
somewhere
maybe
else
that's
because
when
the
you
doctor
have,
won't wait.
Right.
yeah,
They're going somewhere else because the doctor won't wait, and the doctor's going to do the surgery somewhere else.
yeah. So that is where we have to get creative, and maybe we allow that image to go somewhere else, even to the competition, to be able to key up the surgery where we're going to make more money potentially. So, but that has to be somebody involved at that kind of detailed level to see what is in the queue, what's waiting, what do these typically lead to, what are they for? So Darcy, now you're very aware that our model is that our outreach team reports directly to the CEO, hence the last, 2 of your hospitals. Most what we call homegrown or that are internally developed programs aren't designed that way. They're either part of marketing or they're part. So what would you say to liaisons or to leaders on the line about getting that reporting relationship to you? If that was reporting to a different place when you joined the organization, how would you have picked that up and brought it under your leadership?
I think it's imperative. I think that's, I think Tommy said it earlier, sometimes leaders get told what people think they want to hear. And I think unless you're hearing it from the source, it gets muddied along the way. And I think there's always times, it's just, we're human nature, right? People are afraid of getting in trouble. They're afraid of disappointing the CEO. So I don't think the program works. And we had, when I got up to Buffalo, we had a homegrown program there, and they had physician liaisons out in the field, and it just wasn't nearly as effective. And I'll tell you, to your point, when I got there, I was in charge of 3 hospitals up there, and my predecessor was not meeting with these liaisons on a regular basis. So that's something I started doing when I got there. And because that's the only way you hear the real problems, you hear the real issues, is by meeting with these people and that they have the right personality, I guess, that they're not scared to tell you anything, good or bad. Catherine and Brock are incredible liaisons, and they will tell me that they don't even wait till Friday if they hear something negative. They're in my office or they're on the phone right away. Hey, I was just at this office and this is what I heard.
How often do you get tested in the hallway by a doctor? Like I just told Catherine about this morning, and you've already heard about it, or you're
I don't want to say I get tested. I get incredible amount of positive feedback from especially our employed doctors. They really value them. So when I meet with some of the employed physicians, I hear such great stories of how, Catherine and Brock have helped develop business for them, especially the specialty doctors, take them on ride-alongs, which they were a little hesitant to do originally, because they weren't used to doing that. But going out to another secondary market and shaking hands with referral sources, and then all of a sudden they're getting volume the next couple of weeks. They're like, wow, that really worked,
Yeah. Sometimes that's foreign to specialists, and they're like, I'm not a salesperson. That seems really slimy. But once they get out and they see the return on that, it's a game.
And the referring doctors really care about that stuff. They really remember that Dr. X took the time to come out and see me and ask what he could do for me,
Yep. To the question that we had also about getting the message up to the right operational leaders, something that you can do easily, especially if you don't report directly, is create some kind of dashboard that they look forward to receiving from you, where maybe the front page are details about number of call, key areas that you're promoting that particular month or quarter, and then open objections or open issues that have not been resolved. So get them a one page, front and back, you can go, but one page. Leaders, don't have time to read a big long report, but create some dashboard with some key indicators, and I think it'll put you on stage with that leader. Would you agree with that, both Brittany and Darcy? If they don't,
100%.
Absolutely. Some bullet points will always help, and themes, like what I look for always are the patterns. That's what I look for. Like if we're hearing something from multiple people, we really got to get on it. That's got to increase the urgency. And I appreciate the time that our liaisons put into, putting together a thoughtful report. It does make, I would say, our lives a lot easier because we know where we need to start, kind of shifting our focus.
And that's how our Friday meeting is that's the basis of it. They bring the one pager in, talk about all, how many face-to-face contacts they had. Here's the wins we have this week. Here's the challenges we've heard. Here's outstanding issues. And I've expanded that meeting. So my chief operating officer, Jim, is in that meeting. My VP of AMG, our employee practices, is there. And our VP over our ancillary services, so radiology, lab, all those things. Because those are what I find is those are where you're hearing the problems. It's either access to your specialists, access to imaging or lab or something like that. So those people are now just sitting there listening to this stuff with me. And then we can talk about, okay, what are we going to do about this?
What are the 4 categories again?
Of the list?
Yeah.
So basically they talk about how many face-to-face encounters they had, how many, offices they're in that week. They have a list of their wins. So these are the wins for the week. The barriers, new barriers that they heard, or new challenges, and then existing challenges that we're still working on.
Okay.
This sounds very familiar.
Yeah. It's a recipe for success.
This is my report out. That's so funny. I love that. And one thing I was going to add to that, in terms of our liaisons being out there and how obviously Darcy's gotten a ton of success with some of the ones that he has, is also thinking because they spend so much time in these practices and kind of they know what folks are looking for, they also can figure out the right doc to bring along. And I think that's also really crucial. I think sometimes I can tell you in conversations that I've had, we may have, there may be a physician who is, just phenomenal. They're great at what they do, but they just might not be good with people. So when you're talking about that service line, is that the person that you want? You definitely want them there, but maybe they need that additional buddy, whether that's a liaison or someone else that's in their group. If you're, if you're lucky enough to have a group that's doing that. And that's also made a huge difference for us. I'm just always impressed with how well our liaisons are keeping a pulse on things and can kind of help with that relationship too. So that's one thing I think is also really helpful.
I love it. Darcy, there's a question from the audience. How do you define a win for a liaison report out?
It could be a number of different things. It could be as specific as, 2 weeks ago, they were at a competing referring physician talking about selling business and they started getting referrals from that doctor for the first time. So whether that could be outpatient imaging, that could be general surgery referral, anything. So that they can tie it together, that they were in the office asking for business. Physician had not used our system before, and now the physician's using our system. And then they're following up with that doctor, thanking them, making sure the process was smooth. That's a win. It could be like we talked about imaging growth, when we look at, our just data we get every quarter and seeing the growth in outpatient imaging, that's a huge win for the program. So things like that.
Awesome.
And they're in the trenches there sometimes. So they've worked referral queues and they've stood in front of people to clock how long it takes to work through a referral, so they could measure how long it would take to work through 2,000. So sometimes the win is we've solved an operational challenge.
Yeah. Maybe
they shouldn't have had to solve, but did, which was fantastic.
I love it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I know, Darcy, we didn't talk much about your case study, but it'll be in the handouts that everyone will get. But your first year of this program, where you started with the assessment, did the PI stuff, you led all this, showed a 122 million top revenue lift, and which 34 million of it fell to net revenue.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big deal for a first year of a program. So talk about near term, first year, new liaison program, and $34 million net revenue.
We really focused on, brought in a data partner, HSG, as some people might know them, and really started looking at where the opportunity was. To one of your original points was you got to get the data and use the data properly. So, we saw a tremendous opportunity on imaging that was bleeding out of our primary market. And how could we capture that? So we really worked on the process improvement team, creating a a really seamless access to our imaging. And then we went out and sold it. And the growth continues to grow even beyond this. The growth has been tremendous. So I just pulled some numbers together for people. So I'm just looking at outpatient surgery, outpatient cath lab, outpatient CT, and outpatient MRI. So 4, real solid revenue generators. And this fiscal year, so 23 versus 22, up between 30 and 60% those service lines. And then, like I originally said, going back to pre-pandemic, so taking the full fiscal year before the pandemic compared to last year, which had 4 months of pandemic in it, really, depressed volumes, we're still up between 11 and 39% from that year. So just the growth, just solving some access problems, some capacity problems. We recruited some doctors and got them busy, but the liaison program is essential to getting your new doctors busy too. We didn't really talk about that. You get a new doctor comes to the market, you can't afford for them to take 2 years to get busy. And the liaisons are just real catalysts for getting these people busy.
Yeah, and I think to Brittany's point, and I'm going to take it a step further, when you're taking doctors out, we know that's the time in the car that the liaisons are forming awesome relationships with them, but you're setting up the script on who's going to say what in the practice. And if you have a shy provider, you may, as a liaison, you may have to be the spokesperson for them and talk about their, what's great about that physician, because they don't want to toot their own horn. But you have to be in concert. We had a story once we did a webinar with a practice manager who talked about a liaison bringing a neurosurgeon to a huge primary care practice, their monthly meeting, and he insulted all of them because the liaison did not help educate the neurosurgeon on the history with them and the referral sources and the physician and the surgeon who he replaced, and he alienated them. In fact, the manager was told to contact the liaison to say, never bring this person back. So I feel like the liaison potentially set that surgeon up for failure because they didn't educate and help them on the history of the practice. So those are great points. So we have the link that you can get this case study if you want to download it. One other thing that we did was a lean process improvement with your medical group, because if you saw one referral process into a specialty, you saw one. So when primary care were trying to refer to your specialist, if they sent to the surgeons, it was one way. They wanted 5 things. The neurosurgeons wanted 1, the GI wanted 21. So we standardized that as well, which was a potential home run to get referrals into the specialist.
Yeah, that's where you get, if you let individual offices, be too individual, that chases volume away, because the referring doctor in the next town gets so tired of their staff get tired. The referring staff. Well, if I phone this office, I got to have these 5 things. If I phone that one, I got to have 10 things. And they're going to say, well, if I go to the competitor, I need 2 things. And that's all I'm going to do.
Yeah. Path of least resistance.
Oh.
Well, I want to thank you all for being guests and panelists on the webinar today. Any final thoughts or comments that you would like to say to our audience before we close?
I would say, if there's people on the audience that are thinking about a relationship with Tiller-Hewitt, or they're on the fence, or they're talking to you guys, I would say it pays dividends. The ROI it's almost a guarantee.
Thanks, Darcy.
Thank you, sir.
I love that. I would agree. I would also say, lean into this year. Like, really make sure you know what you're good at and you know where you have opportunity to grow, because it might have shifted even as recently as last quarter. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable and doing what you got to do, because those imaging and lab and outpatient, as Darcy mentioned, those can be some of your very, very quick, rapid wins.
I love that. That's a tweetable moment. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Awesome.
Yes,
Tommy?
tweetable.
That's right. Tommy, anything?
Nope. I think I've said enough.
All right.
Thank you guys so
all
much.
for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
See you
Bye.
later.